Modern Times marked the last screen appearance of the Little Tramp, the character which had brought Charles Chaplin world fame and who still remains the most universally recognised fictional human figure in history. The world from which the tramp took his farewell was very different from that into which he had been born 2 decades earlier, before the First World War. Then he had shared and symbolised the hardships of all the underprivileged of a world only just emerging from the 19th century. Modern Times found him facing very different predicaments in the aftermath of America's Great Depression, when mass unemployment coincided with the rise of industrial automation. Chaplin was acutely preoccupied with the social and economic problems of this new age. In 1931, he had left Hollywood behind to embark on an 18-month world tour. In Europe, he had been disturbed to see the rise of nationalism and the social effects of the Depression, of unemployment and of automation. He read books on economic theory and devised his own economic solution, an intelligent exercise in utopian idealism based on a more equitable distribution not just of wealth but of work. In 1931, he told a newspaper interviewer, "Unemployment is the vital question. Machinery should benefit mankind. It should not spell tragedy and throw it out of work." In Modern Times, he set out to transform his observations and anxieties into comedy. The Little Tramp is now one of the millions coping with the problems of the 1930s, which are not very different from anxieties of our own times: poverty, unemployment, strikes and strike breakers, political intolerance, economic inequalities, the tyranny of the machine. The film's opening title, "The Story of Industry, of Individual Enterprise, Humanity Crusading in the Pursuit of Happiness," is followed by an ironic juxtaposition of shots of sheep being herded and of workers streaming out of a factory. Charlie is first seen as a worker being driven crazy by his monotonous, inhuman work on a conveyor belt and being used as a guinea pig to test a machine to feed workers while they work. Exceptionally, the tramp has a companion in his battle with this new world. On his return to America, Chaplin had met the actress Paulette Goddard, who was to remain for several years an ideal partner in his private life. Her personality inspired the character of the gamine in Modern Times, a young girl whose father has been killed in a strike and who joins forces with Chaplin. The couple are neither rebels nor victims, but, wrote Chaplin, the only two life spirits in a world of automatons. We are children with no sense of responsibility, whereas the rest of humanity is weighed down with duty. We are spiritually free. In a sense, then, they are anarchists. They first meet in a police wagon where the desperate girl has been thrown for stealing a loaf of bread and subsequently set up home together, though in the most innocent Platonic style. Chaplin at first planned a sadly sentimental ending. While the tramp was in hospital recovering from nervous breakdown, the gamine was to become a nun and so be parted from him forever. This ending was actually filmed but was finally abandoned in favour of a more cheerful finale. A title says, "We'll get along," and the couple, arm in arm, set bravely off down a country lane towards the horizon. By the time Modern Times was released, talking pictures had been established for almost a decade. Till now, Chaplin had resisted dialogue, knowing that his comedy and its universal understanding depended on silent pantomime. This time, though, he weakened to the extent of preparing dialogue and even doing some trial recordings. Finally, he thought better of it, and, as in City Lights, uses only music and sound effects. Just at one moment, though, his voice is heard. Hired as a singing waiter, he is obliged to stand in for the romantic tenor. He writes the words on his shirt cuffs, but these fly off at the first dramatic flourish, so that he is obliged to improvise the song in a wonderful mock-Italian gibberish. Chaplin's voice had already been heard on radio and in at least one newsreel, but this was the first and the only time that the world heard speech from the Little Tramp. Apart from this indecision over sound and the changed ending, the shooting seems to have been fairly untroubled and, by Chaplin standards, comparatively fast. As he had done for City Lights, Chaplin composed his own musical score and gave his arrangers and conductors a harder time than usual, with the result that the distinguished Hollywood musician Alfred Newman walked off the film and had to be replaced. Modern Times became the victim of a strange charge of plagiarism. The Franco-German firm of Tobis claimed that Chaplin had stolen ideas and scenes from another classic film about the 20th century industrial world, À nous la liberté, directed by René Clair. Their case was weak, and Clair, a great admirer of Chaplin, was deeply embarrassed by it. Yet Tobis persisted and even renewed its claims in 1947 after the Second World War. This time the Chaplin studio finally agreed to make a modest payment, simply to get rid of the nuisance. Chaplin and his lawyers were convinced that the determination of the German-dominated company was revenge for the anti-Nazi statement of the great dictator. Happily for the world, Tobis failed in their original demand to have Chaplin's film permanently suppressed. Instead, Modern Times remains as a commentary on human survival in the industrial, economic and social circumstances of the 20th century. It is still as relevant in human terms for the 21st century.